Salutations everyone, this is Razor bringing guys another Overwatch 2 video here today talking about damage. Yeah, not a role we talk about a lot, even though, a couple videos I did talk about, Echo and Pharah, but it's a role that I do find that a lot of people are playing incorrectly, which can be understandable because as a tank and as a healer, you know what your responsibilities are. They're very clear-cut and very obvious all of the time. Where it's not so much with damage because what do you do as damage? Just do damage. Throw the cooldowns out and hope something dies, right? Sure, that can work. And that is, a gist, I guess you could say, of what you are supposed to do. But I feel like a lot of people are playing it wrong. Not that it's always the wrong character for the wrong situation, although that can definitely be it, but it's the DPS not finding out what they're supposed to do and then executing on it. So what do I mean by that? So, I would never consider myself a great DPS player. I would forgive you for at any point in this game looking at what you're seeing and be like, this guy's not very good at playing damage, right? He doesn't have an insane aim. He's not popping off and getting quads and pentas and things like that. And yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. I'm not playing a great game here, but I still go 39-8, which guess what? That's a winning end stat line. If you go 39-8, you've won that game, right? I don't know if I've ever had a game with that kind of stat line in which we lost. And we didn't in this game either. And I start off slow. Or, our tank didn't know what tank they wanted to be, and they were getting mismatched, and now they're trying to figure out what they want to do. The enemy team has a very, very good lineup, right? Sigma, great on this map. They've got Symmetra, high-key one of the best characters in the game. I mean, if she's got any sort of charge, she can even 1v1 some tanks. Super duper strong, lots of bridges, right? Moira, super duper strong character, a character that you can easily get the lead in damage and heals on your team when it shouldn't be that easy. It can be with her. So they have a good team. Our team, not maybe as best on paper with the characters, but I could safely say we had the better team as well. Took us a little bit of adjustments, and everybody does make mistakes. But from the DPS role, what you need to figure out, and this can take, a team fight or two, find out what is your purpose. This can be more obvious with certain characters. If you're like, okay, on this map, I tend to like picking this character. And, if that's working out, it's like, no, okay, they don't have the counters that I don't want to play, so I'm not going to switch. You can kind of go into your autopilot mode of like, I usually start with this route and I'll go after, this character, this there, something like that. Like if you pick Tracer, you know what you're supposed to do, right? If you played Tracer for any amount of time, all right, take a look at the, what the enemy comp is, and I pick my target. This is the target that's going to have the hardest time not dying to me, and I'm going to go after them, right? This character is an easy pulse bomb, right? Or if you're Pharah, you're going to fly in the sky and figure out what's vulnerable. Do they have a Torb turret that's going to knock you out of the sky? Are they going to focus you down with an Ashe, Widowmaker, Soldier, Sojourn, whatever? You are looking out for what are their answers to me. And for some characters, that is the key. Find out, do they have the answer? And if not, then exploit it. Another is figuring out what can't they answer, and then pick that character. So for this game, I didn't need to switch. I do play Ashe here on attack, and I play Hanzo on defense. I didn't need to, I didn't have to be Ashe on attack. I didn't have to be Hanzo on defense. That is just what I chose to do in this game. But when looking for what is my role, what is my purpose, it was what can I contribute to the game, to the team, right? So we take a look at the tank matchups, and we have a D.Va and they have a Sigma. So they're going to have a bit more sustainability, but we're going to have more maneuverability, right? So we need to play to that strength, and maybe it's taking away the Sigma strength, blowing away his shield with Junkrat or Bastion, right? That could be one way of doing it. Or in conjunction with your other DPS partner, finding a weak point and leveraging from there. So with Ashe and with Hanzo, similarly, they're playing a slow, safe, stable tank in Sigma. You can do the same with Orisa and a little bit more with Reinhardt, not as much as he was in Overwatch 1. He's got a bit more maneuverability and fluidity that he has in Overwatch 2. But he can still be played in that same way, depending on the map, right? So what can I do from the damage roll when they're playing a safe, comfortable, static tank? What I'm going to do, well, there's a couple of things I can do, right? I could pair with the D.Va and go dive. Pick Tracer, pick Genji. Or, since they're playing something slow and damaging, Sigma does a ton of damage, I could play also something that's slow, stationary, and even more damaging. Just win outright with the math. So they have a Symmetra. That value is going to come at close range. It's going to make our D.Va a little bit harder to dive in on a character because you're going to get pressure from all these angles from these different turrets. But Dynamite can wipe out a whole cluster of turrets, right? That's a big AoE blast. You're typically going to know where they're going to want to put their turrets. And if you don't know where they're going to want to be, at some point very quickly, you're going to know where they are. See, I knew they were going to be on that wall because that's just what makes the most sense, right? So all of a sudden, that Symmetra loses that, and our D.Va can ideally go in when it is best suited for her. Our Mei makes a good play. Ice Wall is always going to be powerful. I got a good opportunity to bob here. We bob each other's bobs and start exchanging ultimates, and our team comes out on top here with the Blizzard, interrupting the Flux and wiping the team right here after this Ana and finishing off the attack. So I didn't need to adjust because I was already in a role that suited the need for the team. And sometimes that need is just finding what hole the enemy is going to present to you. I know that sounds like a double entendre, but I promise it's not. The enemy team is always going to give you an opportunity. There's always going to be a hole, and it's whether a question of if you can recognize what that hole is, and that's usually super duper easy, and then picking the character or play style that best suits to exploit that weakness that the enemy team is definitely going to be having. And sometimes it's like in my last DPS video, I talked about Pharah and Echo, right? They're in the sky, not getting contested, humongous value. They're playing like a Roadhog. They can't do anything against the sky opponent, right? Super duper easy. But if they were playing like a Bastion or a Torbjorn, things aren't going to be so easy. So you're going to need to find a different route in order to leverage some sort of power that you're going to have over the enemy team. Sometimes it's exploiting a weakness in their backline of their supports. Sometimes it's how your tank matches up with their tank. And sometimes it could just be their DPS, right, is popping off. So it's your responsibility to fight up against that. That's what a lot of people from the damage roll end up missing. And they just like, I pick this character, then I play this character, and then hopefully I win, right? That's how a lot of people like to play damage. They don't find out what is... where's the value that they can give. They just kind of like throw cooldown, soap things dies by doing the same things I do all the time with this character or characters that I end up liking to play fairly often, or at the very least on this map, or maybe with this support partner, or with this teammate, or with this tank, or against this tank, right? There's always going to be some sort of exploit, whether it's all right, their Ana is just always in the back getting a ton of value and not getting contested, but no one's going to peel for her. So as a Sombra or a Tracer or Genji, you find that weakness and boom, you get it. Or, sometimes it can be obvious like that, right? And sometimes it can be a bit of a tall order. Like Bastion gives a ton of value in this game, especially if he has some sort of pocket like a Mercy. Nothing is going to out-damage him. Even a tank with all their cooldowns played perfectly, Bastion still is going to do way more damage unless you can get some help. Sigma is great in that he can shield. He'll block that damage hose for a little bit, but then he has to go into the kinetic grasp, which is only going to buy him time, in which he might be getting healed, or your teammates are imposing their will upon him, right? Hitting them with an anti, or a sleep, or a discord, or just behind them shooting in the weak spot, right? A Tracer, a Genji, a Reaper, right? Reaper is one of those characters that is definitely exploitative. If they are not playing, if we're playing something like Control, and they're not having a direct answer to me, you can exploit that. If they're not going to stop me as Bastion, I can just run up and blast down anything that they have. They're typically not going to be playing a shield. Most people are not playing shield tanks. Orisa falls apart when you throw a lot of damage on her, especially if you have something like a Discord Orb or a Bastion. Or if you're in a good map for flyers and they don't have an answer to a flyer, you pick that. Or in my case, they have an Orisa and a Sigma. Orisa, a tankier tank than Sigma, most would think, but Sigma has the shield and he has the kinetic grasp, so he's going to be he's going to have just as much presence on an objective and can create just as much space as Orisa, if not more, when played properly or given more support, right? So since they are not challenging me at my longer ranges, Bastion's not as much of a threat to me past mid-range, right? And their Symmetra is not really going to stop me. They don't have a DPS Moira going crazy. I can leverage that freedom that the enemy team is giving me to help my tank win that fight or pressure out the Bastion. I can get him weak, get him, he starts in his turret form, right? I get him weak. He's like, I don't want to die. I'm going to move over to this corner. Or it forces the supports to put cooldowns into the Bastion to keep him up. Otherwise, he dies, and then you've got leverage immediately there. Or the focus is put on their healers onto their own Bastion instead of their tank. And since I know Sigma has the ability to do a 1v1 with double mitigation powers, he then can take advantage of those precious few seconds that the supports are using to heal the Bastion to give us an advantage within that fight. That's not necessarily getting a kill, but sometimes it's, your Ana hits the anti-nade and then you can press an advantage. Or a Moira Orb skitters away and gets a Mercy low that just used her Guardian Angel, or they left somebody out of position, right? There's a McCree and all he has is a combat roll and nobody to peel for him. And all of a sudden he's diveable even by like a slow tank, right? It's just something you can just jump up in his face and just win with your big HP pool. So I'm playing the range that makes sense to me. Our Sigma is going to be able to survive toe-to-toe in Orisa's game that she wants to play. So I'm leveraging that at being able to poke out, build big ultimates, which is going to be good against Orisa. Not a lot of mobility there. Bastion, not a lot of mobility there. He's going to be telegraphing his lack of mobility when he does go into his turret form, and I can press that advantage and move against that. Same with my Ashe, or when I was Ashe before. Hit the dynamite, something is going to be vulnerable. So, a support is going to have to lay back and wait for their passive to kick in, or for their support partner to put heals onto them. It'll get a Moira to go into Fade to cleanse it, or it's going to force a bad positioning, where I think Dragons are successful from the defensive side of things, is that I know where the enemy is usually going to be, because they have an objective that they are going to need the push, and they're going to have to be relatively near the entire portion of the game. So my ability to split off with dragons or with like a dink headshot, I can maximize the amount of power that is given to Hanzo the character, right? From his kit. So I don't, have to rely on getting the power boost. I know I'm not going to get dove on, and I have my dive always at the ready. There's not a lot of dark targets for me to go immediately up against aggressively with my hop, so it's a defensive option. There's not a lot of things that I'm going to have to worry about there. And as the Mercy Valks keeping the Orisa up, our Ashe is up top, neglected. She is leveraging her advantage that the enemy team has given her, and that's really the name of the game. Are their supports exploitable? Is their tank v tank matchup exploitable? Are they picking a tank that's not so great up against your tank? You can take that hole in their game plan and exploit it by throwing a ton of damage via long range like your Widows, your Hanzos, your Ashes, short range like your Reapers or your Junkrats or your Tracers possibly, getting them to turn their heads with Symmetra turrets, Torb turrets, or a diving Genji or Tracer, and that can be all that you need to make up the difference in the game. DPS is such an easy role to play. You should never, ever be going negative at any point as damage. It's such an easy role that the enemy team is going to give you an opportunity to win. There's always going to be a hole for you to exploit, and that's all you need to do. Find out what you need to shore up or what exploits you can use to leverage this easy position to win the game.